struggle swimming in deep water? You aren't alone. Over 65% of adults worldwide have a paralyzing fear of water above their head. And that is why we made this series, Deep Water Mastery. In this series, we will share our simple 3-step process to ensure you are 100% confident and never allow deep water to hold you back again. Before we get started, it's absolutely essential that you never swim alone and always learn with someone who is capable of helping you in case you're in a situation where you may need it. Part 1 of Deep Water Mastery is actually mastering how to swim in shallow water for a minimum of 3 to 5 minutes. Now, we just wrapped up our Shallow Water Mastery series. I urge you, if you have not seen that, to go back and watch it, master the 12 steps inside of it, because that will set your foundation for entering confidently into deep water. I will link that video right up here. Part 2, we are going to cover 8 simple movements that I need you to master in shallow water that will help us create an additional foundation that we will use in part 3 when we bring these exact same 8 movements into deep water. So with that, let's begin on movement number 1, which is a vertical float in the shallow end. Movement number 1 in the shallow end is called the wall vertical float. And I want you to find a wall, a gutter, or maybe even a ladder. And I want you to firmly place both hands on the gutter. Then you're going to lower yourself down into the water. I want you to take a deep diaphragmatic breath and really fill our lungs up with air. Remember, that's what helps create our body's natural buoyancy in the water. From there, I want you to slowly lean your head back and lift your legs up off the bottom of the pool. Now, what you will notice is your body initially will begin to move up and down until it settles, usually with the water level right at about our chin or our mouth. And then I want you to begin a natural breathing process and get used to the movement of our body moving up and down in the water. But enough of me talking about it. Let me show you exactly what I want it to look like now. Here are 3 key takeaways that I want from you inside of this movement. Key takeaway number 1, and by far the most important, is that you feel the water holding you up. This is absolutely our essential foundation as we continue progressing and eventually moving into deep water. It's the knowing that the water is here to support you and hold you up that we want to take away from this movement. Key takeaway number 2 is I want you to be 100% confident and comfortable with the feeling of your body moving up and down in the water. So as you're going through this movement a number of times, I want you to check in with yourself and notice that if as you start to exhale and your body lowers in the water, if that starts to create anxiety, tension, or apprehension inside of this movement. And if it does, just go back through the Caribe swim relaxation process and ensure you spend enough time acclimating to this movement before moving on to movement number 2. And key takeaway number 3, I want you to get extremely comfortable with leaning just our head back in the water instead of just holding it straight up. When we lean just our head back, the tension on the surface of the water will help our body balance, and it will make our vertical float that much easier. So I encourage you to stay here, practice this a minimum of 10 times, and get comfortable leaning the head back, feeling the water supporting us and holding us up. One thing that many of my students notice in the beginning as they're first going through this movement is that they carry tension, especially in their arms. And they have a natural tendency to want to pull their body into the wall. And so what you will notice is that if you find your knees moving in and rubbing up against the wall, I urge you to try to relax our arms. It tends to be a defense mechanism where we hold our tension and we want to pull our body in for a safety reason. So if that sounds like you, go back through the Caribe Swim relaxation process, continue relaxing the arms and practicing at this stage before progressing on to the next movement. Movement number 2 is very similar to movement number 1, only this time we're going to let our hands slide off of the wall so that we're able to achieve an independent vertical float. That movement looks like this. The biggest takeaway that we hear from our students as they're first practicing their independent vertical float is they feel like they may lean to one side or the other. So as you're practicing that, if that sounds like you, it's totally normal and it's completely okay. And it just means that we're carrying a little bit more tension in one side of our body than the other. And it tends to be that although we feel like we're really starting to tip over, the amount of tipping that actually happens is normally much smaller than how it feels. But nonetheless, what this means is that you need to go back through the Caribe Swim relaxation process, try to work out any of that tension in your body until you can complete 5 to 10 rounds of this independent vertical float without feeling that tipping to one side or the other. And key takeaway number 2 from our students is that they feel and that you feel like the water is supporting you and holding you up. I know I said that in exercise number 1, but guess what? I'm going to continue to say that as we go through this because it's really the biggest foundational takeaway that you can make here in the shallow end before moving into deep water is the knowing that the water is here to hold you up and support you. So ensure that as you're going through this movement, you bring that awareness into your headspace and that you feel the water really holding you up. Exercise number 3 is we're going to begin using our arms to propel ourselves forward back towards the wall once we have drifted away from the wall in our vertical float. And to use our arms in a sculling motion is a very simple and basic movement. All I want you to do is relax your arms, have them out in front of you like this, turn our palms outward slightly, and just slowly move our arms outward before recovering them back to the front and doing that again. When you complete this movement, it will look like this. Key takeaway number 1 in our forward movement from a vertical float is that we maintain a state of relaxation through our circular arm movements. One of the things that I've noticed from our students in the beginning, if they're not 100% comfortable yet with being in a vertical float and moving forward, is these movements tend to be very rushed and tense. And this ends up costing our students buoyancy. They tend to sink a little bit more, and it tires them out. Not to mention, it doesn't really help them move forward in the water. And this is a very important step in maintaining our safety in the deep end, because anytime that we float away from a wall, when we're able to have a relaxed movement back towards that wall, that helps build not only our confidence, but it ensures our safety, that we can get back to a place where we're stable and safe on the wall. So I want you to practice this movement a minimum of 20 times where you're 100% calm and confident during the entire movement. Key takeaway number 2 is I invite you to explore your own range of movement when you're starting to move forward towards the wall. Every student that I've seen is going to have a little bit different range of movement and what makes them or you feel most comfortable moving forward. Some of my students will have bigger circular arms, some will have a little bit smaller movements. Either way, the primary objective is that 1, you're starting to move forward, and 2, you maintain a state of pure relaxation when you do it. Exercise number 4, we call basketball bobs. And that's when we take a big inhale, we actually move our body and face into the water, and we tuck our legs and our arms together into a ball and just allow ourselves to float and feel the water supporting us and holding us up. That movement looks like this. Key takeaway number 1 of our basketball bobs is that you feel the water supporting you and holding you up. Inside of this movement, we should feel relatively high in the water. And this is such an essential takeaway that we learn here in shallow water before bringing this into deep water. And that's that the water is holding you up. It's supporting your flotation. This is a massive psychological understanding for our new students, that the water is here as a tool to help you in your buoyancy and not something that you have to fight against. And when you take the time to really understand, feel it, and know it here in shallow water, I can't tell you how much that's going to help you psychologically and in your confidence once we take this into the deep water. Exercise number 5, we're going to build on our basketball bobs, only this time, once we're in our basketball bob for about 3 seconds, we're actually going to open up our body so that we're introducing more of a forward front float, and then we're going to propel our arms 1 or 2 times down to the side to move towards the wall back to a point of safety. When we do this, the exercise will look like this. Key takeaway number one is that we maintain a state of relaxation as we're opening our body up and moving our arms to our side to propel ourselves forward. If you remember back to our shallow water mastery series, this movement mimics our forward propulsion movement that we learned inside of that series. So if you need any touch-ups on how to stay relaxed and move our arms down to the side before recovering them forward and beginning again, please revisit that series and then come back to this portion of the learning in our Deep Water Mastery series. Key takeaway number two that some of our students experience is if you carry any amount of tension when you're starting to open up, you may notice your body sink a little bit first before recovering back up to the surface of the water. Maintain a state of relaxation and trust through that process. The water will bring you back up to the top. But nonetheless, let me show you what that looks like, just so that you're aware in case it happens to you. And key takeaway number three just relates to point number two, which is I want to ensure that when you open up, we don't have too much of that up and down movement. So continue practicing this over and over and over again until you are 100% relaxed, opening up and moving yourself back to a place of safety on the wall. Exercise number 6 is called a chair bob. And in this movement, we are going to intentionally begin submerging ourselves under the water using an upward motion with our arms, which forces us down under the water, before turning our arms the opposite way, pushing ourselves down, which sends us back up, which will allow us to get a fresh breath. And we do this with our legs extended forward, almost like we're sitting in a chair, hence the name chair bob. This is an essential step in gaining comfort with submerging ourselves underwater and then knowing that we can push ourselves or our arms down, which sends us back up. And this really helps us gain comfort and confidence, learning how to do this in the shallow end first, and understanding that we can control gaining a new breath anytime we want before moving and doing this movement into the deep end. When we do this movement, it looks like this. Key takeaway number 1 is I want you to practice and ensure you're 100% comfortable exhaling from your nose every time your head submerges under the water. Now, in the beginning, if you are inhaling or getting water in your nose, I would highly encourage you to get a nose plug, put it on, and just get comfortable with the movement first before taking it off and returning and practicing that exhaling from your nose. But what I absolutely don't want you to do is push through getting a bunch of water in your nose just for the sake of trying to get on to the next exercise. Do not do that. So if you get water in your nose, grab a nose plug, put it on, and continue practicing this motion. Key takeaway number 2 may sound really obvious and basic, but that is that you ensure you're actually breathing when your head is above the water. Now, a lot of my students, I would say a minimum of 50%, when they're first going through this movement, it will take them some time to really acclimate and learn how to actually breathe in when their head breaks the surface of the water. So if when you practice this, all that happens is your mouth opens, but no air goes in. You're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing abnormal about it. Just continue practicing and gaining comfort. We believe that it is our body's inherent defense mechanism from spending your entire life not knowing how to swim that prevents you from actually getting air in your mouth and in your lungs when we first are going through this movement. So continue going through the Caribe swim relaxation process and stay on this step until you get a full breath of air filling your lungs every single time before moving on to the next exercise in this 8-part series. Exercise number 7 is just a back float. And remember, we just finished covering this in our shallow water mastery program, but we will build on our back float in exercise number 8. But before we do that, let's go back and just continue practicing our 100% relaxed back float here in the shallow end. When we do that, it looks like this. And here are 3 key takeaways for a relaxed back float. Number 1, remember our head position should be looking slightly behind us and not at our toes. This will help our buoyancy. Number 2, make sure before going into our back float that you get a full, deep diaphragmatic breath. More air in our lungs will make us more buoyant during our back float. And key takeaway number 3 is when we are going back to a stand-up position, we slowly start looking at our toes, allowing our body to sink, and then extending our legs down to the bottom of the pool, which allows us to stand back up. I want you to re-practice your back float a minimum of 10 times where you're 100% calm and confident through that entire process before moving on to exercise number 8. Exercise number 8 is a back float reversal and is the final exercise that we will practice here in the shallow end before moving and practicing all 8 of these exercises in the deep end. Here is how we do our back float reversal. We're going to go into our back float again before bringing our body's momentum forward and reversing into a front float, and then moving our arms down to the side and propelling ourselves back to the wall. When we do that exercise, it looks like this. Let's break down the reversal into 4 simple parts. Part number 1 is going from our back float or laying down in the water to more of sitting up into a chair movement. That looks like this. Part 2 is the exercise we just covered, which is going into a tuck in our basketball bob motion. That looks like this. Part 3 resembles our opening up from our basketball bob before part 4, which is starting to propel ourselves forward back to the wall. Parts 3 and 4, when we put it all together, look like this. The biggest key takeaway for this back float reversal is that you master the movement. I need you to practice this every time you go to the pool, and a minimum of 50 times. I mean, really master this movement, because this is a key to your safety and success when we bring this movement into deep water. And I'm sure you've noticed that this reversal movement and then propulsion back to the wall is a combination of not only our shallow water mastery and the movements that we did there, but also the first 7 movements that we did inside of our deep water mastery program. So make sure you're 100% calm and confident going through this movement every single time before we progress now onto the next step, which is starting back over at exercise number 1, but bringing that into deep water. I can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much for joining me in this step-by-step deep water video. If you need any additional support, make sure to join our community by clicking on the link in the description below. And as always, if you found this video helpful, support our channel by liking and subscribing to the page. I can't wait to see you in the next one.